I can hardly believe it, but it's been exactly a year since this happened.
The time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
I know we've all had different experiences of this pandemic and different things have happened in different countries at different times. But for most of us, COVID has been affecting our lives for a whole year now. If you've been drinking more than you wanted to over the past 12 months, you certainly aren't alone. Many people have seen their drinking increase. But now, as we reach this rather grim 1-year milestone, well, now is a really good time to be thinking about how you want to move forward. This pandemic isn't over yet, but we're on the way. Wouldn't it be so great for you to drop back into your normal life, having tackled your drinking and made a change that you're really proud of? I think that process starts with reflecting on the past year, how you feel about it and what you've learned. Even if you've drunk your way through it, you've learned more about what you do and don't want in your life. And whilst I hope that we never have to go through anything like this again, life is never going to be perfect either. And whatever it was about the pandemic that you hated the most, perhaps the isolation, the uncertainty, money worries, feeling overwhelmed, missing friends, whatever it was, you will probably experience one of those things again in future, in a different context, in a different phase or time in your life. There is no use being one of those people who can only ever quit drinking when life is perfect. So now is a good time to think about how you want to deal with these things in future. What have you learned from a year of drinking through difficult times? Did it work? Did it feel great or not? I mean, I'm guessing it didn't feel amazing, or else you wouldn't be watching this. Last week, I posted a discussion thread in one of my groups. So I have a private member community for women who've been through my 6-week stop drinking program. And the question I asked everyone was this: what has this pandemic taught you? And the responses I got back from my students were so interesting, so good. I thought I would share them with you here, because most of the women who replied to my post are somewhere between 3 to 9 months alcohol free. And that means 2 things. First of all, they have proved that yes, you can quit drinking during a pandemic. And B, it means they've had this quite unique experience of doing lockdown whilst drinking and doing lockdown alcohol free. They've homeschooled with hangovers and they've homeschooled without. So I thought you might be interested in hearing what they have to say, having tried to manage this past year with and without alcohol. I think their perspectives are really valuable. So I'm not going to waffle on here anymore. I'm going to get right into what they posted, because there are just some amazing takeaways here. If you are on the verge of quitting drinking or wondering if it's possible for you, then there are some really good things to learn from this. So first of all, Holly, who took my course last October, shared this epic post with her reflections, and I'm going to read out a couple of bits of it to you now. She says, "The Swiss lockdown started and I remember feeling panic that we might run out of wine, so I started stockpiling bottles. The combination of grief and the pandemic turned up the volume on fear, sadness and bewilderment, which, alongside the stress of looking after 2 babies 24/7, left me grappling for an off switch. Wine, said everyone. Have some wine. Wine on Zoom, wine while watching the news, Wine while fighting with my husband about childcare and chores. Wine while I tried to cram in some work at the end of the day after I put the babies to bed. The days were so hard and so relentless hungover. I would push the double buggy up the hill to the forest, listening to Kate Bush, keep running up that hill, desperately hoping both babies would sleep. My emotions felt so heavy, everything felt like an endless well of awfulness. I think it was through Googling how to get through wine o'clock that Kate popped up, and the course gave me the framework to really understand that a life without drinking was possible. I don't think I would still be here, sober, almost 6 months on, if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I would have always found a way to obfuscate how much I drank or excuse it with an event or an evening out. The pandemic has been insanely hard and unfair for women, and I think we paid a really high price, and there should and will be some kind of reckoning. But it's also been good in that things got tough enough that I realised the booze wasn't helping, and that is huge. I feel really grateful for that. Life is still sometimes boring and relentless, but I'm so relieved that I have the energy and mental clarity I need to weather this storm. Janet took my course at the beginning of this year, and she wrote, "The pandemic has taught me how to be with myself again. When we first went into lockdown in 2020 and I had to work from home, I never thought I would manage. I got by on treats to make myself feel better, shopping, chocolate, and then before I knew it, the wine witch started visiting earlier and earlier. My wake-up call was seeing a picture taken between lockdowns. I almost did not recognise myself, looking bloated and grim. When the third lockdown loomed in January, I realised I had to do something, and the universe led me to Kate. The past 10 weeks have begun the process of bringing me back to myself. I am now 75 days alcohol-free and have been given the gift of a clear head, long nights of sleep, conversations with my children, and the time to restart my interests." Amanda shared this. "This year taught me that I could let some friendships go that had been previously drifting and were not so beneficial to me. I lost my dad in December and found I could cope with grief in lockdown. I also learned that being alcohol-free and sitting with feelings is really hard, but with the right people behind you, it is possible. I think in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is, I found out that I'm stronger than what I thought I was, but I've also realised that I need to reach out and ask for help, as some things are too big to cope with alone." Meanwhile, Louise makes this great point. "The pandemic was an eye-opener in so many ways regarding drinking. The negative was that it became not only socially acceptable to drink alone, but encouraged. That's so true. The positive was the absolute resolve and recognition that this daily feeling of going nowhere while being physically ill was not covered up by any exterior activity. You were left alone with yourself and the option to stay where you are or make a move to improve." I know Susie took my class last October, and she says she learned that my family and my health is really important to me. The first 6 months of the pandemic, the weather was amazing and we were out in the sunshine drinking every day. That's when I realised that not only was this affecting my health, but my relationship with my son. He was getting very annoyed at us for how much time we spent drinking, and he wasn't wrong. Now, my relationship with him is really good and we are a family again. No more arguments. Deborah made this great point about what we do and don't have power over. She says, "For me, the pandemic is another reminder that there is so much about life, about this world, that is not in my control. So I have to focus on the things I can control. That's my attitude. how I choose to show up for myself and others, how I take care of my mental and physical health. I feel so much better now that I'm really taking care of myself, knowing that even though I could still fall ill, I'm doing my best to build a strong immune system. Ali shared this. After drinking a bottle of wine a day in lockdown, my anxiety was through the roof and I had low-level depression. I felt overwhelmed by everything. I took a long, hard look at myself and decided to do the October 2020 course. The pandemic was the catalyst for me to go alcohol-free. I am feeling less anxious and I can look at myself straight in the eye and feel I am trying my best. My family deserve the best version of me, and that's what I'm working on. And finally, I wanted to finish with this from Kirsten, who says, in a general sense, the pandemic has taught me that humans are far more adaptable than we give ourselves credit for. So true, right? It's also helped me reevaluate what is important in life and what isn't. So I hope those posts resonated with you and prompted you to reflect on what you've learned. There were just so many different takeaways within what I've shared here. I want to finish by sharing what I learned from the past 12 months. Because I think the thing the pandemic really taught me was that our idea of what's normal changes so much quicker than we think. 12 months ago, I wouldn't have believed that I would ever get used to wearing a mask everywhere and seeing other people wearing them. It seemed so strange to begin with, didn't it? And I don't know about you, but I was always forgetting mine. Now, I don't even think about it. I carry it with me like I carry money to the shops. So it's just a really small and specific example of how adaptable we are. We might not like change, and it is uncomfortable at first. So we create these stories about how it's always going to feel so weird, but that just isn't true. If you can find a new normal in the middle of something horrible like a pandemic, then you sure as hell can find a new normal in something amazing like sobriety. So now it's your turn. No matter how you've handled the past 12 months, scroll down and let me know in the comments what you've learned and what your takeaway is. I'm wishing you a great week.